Okay, today we're going to do area of shapes. So the first thing we want to do is start identifying some shapes. So what is this shape called? Rectangle. Good. So let's write rectangle here. Let's go to another one. How about this one? What's that called? A square. Good. And this one? Trapezoid. Good. What about this one? This one's a little tricky. It's not a rectangle, it's a parallelogram. Good. Spell that long word out. Parallelogram. Okay, now these two are both what? Triangles, right? But there's a difference. Does anybody know what this makes that triangle? That's our right angle. So this is a right triangle. And this is just a triangle. All right, so area is the surface measurement. So this is surface measurement of a two-dimensional figure. So basically what that means, it's the number of squares that fit inside a shape. So when we find area, we want to know how many squares can I fit inside of these shapes. So some real life examples where you see area is if you look right now at the carpet, there's carpet squares. So the number of carpet squares that cover this floor in this classroom, that's the area of this floor. Oh, I want this to be squares. The other thing, like when you go into the cafeteria, if you look at the tile on the floor, they're squares. So the number of tiles, squares that make up the cafeteria is the area of the cafeteria floor. So you see area anywhere. A wall, if you look at the walls, the amount of paint that was used to cover the wall is area. All stuff like that. Anything on a flat surface, anything inside the shape is the area of that shape. So to find the area of rectangles, every shape sort of has a different way to find the area. Some are easier than others. So let's start with rectangles. It says count the dimensions of each of the rectangles below. Then count the number of squares inside each rectangle. All right, so rectangle 1, the length is right here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares long. And the width is, actually let's do this as the length, okay? So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares long and 5 squares wide. So now we want to count the number of total squares because that's what area is. Area is the number of squares inside of the shape. So let's count these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. So the total squares, or the total area of the shape, is 35 squares. Okay, let's do the next one. The length of this rectangle is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. The width is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 squares. So we want to figure out the total squares. So hit pause and count how many squares are in here. Okay, if you counted all these squares, you should have gotten 54. So if you were able to get 54, good job. If you didn't, hit pause and go back and count again. All right, let's do the next one. Let's do this rectangle. The length is 1, 2, 3, 4. And the width is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is still considered a rectangle, but it has a more special name. What is that special name? When the length and the width are the same. when all the sides are equal. What's that called? This is really a square also. So now when we count the number of squares inside, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's 16 squares that make up the inside of that shape. So we can always like draw squares and count, but what do we do when we don't have squares? And what do we do if there's a ton of squares? Do you see a pattern that happens here? What are you doing to get these answers? Aren't you multiplying? Isn't 7 times 5, 35? 6 times 9, 54. 4 times 4, 16. So what measurements are you multiplying to find the area? Because you're not always going to do 7 times 5. It's not always going to be 6 times 9. But in a more general tone, what are you multiplying to get that? If you said you're multiplying your length times your width equals your area, you would be correct. So anytime they give you a rectangle, all you do is multiply the length times the width, and that gives you your area. Okay, so here's an example. It says, describe how this pattern could be applied to the picture to the right. Then find the area. So I want to know how many feet, this is in feet, how many square feet fill up this door. So first of all, is this a real size door? No, right? This is not 8.5 feet. This is a scale drawing. But I don't have the boxes anymore. So the first thing I have to do is identify the shape. So if I look at this, I know that it's a rectangle. And I learned on the other page that if I take the length of the rectangle and I multiply it by the width, that will equal my area. So make sure you write this down. So the length is right here. It's 8.5 feet wide or long times the width, which is 3. So when I multiply those together, I do 8.5 times 3, and that gives me 25.5. So here's the trick. First of all, it's in feet, so we need to put that on there. But remember, I'm finding the number of squares inside. So in math, the number that represents squared is a tiny 2. So this is saying 25.5 feet squared. So if this was a real door, 25.5 square feet would fit inside that door. That's what that means. Okay, the dimensions of a parallelogram can also be referred to as the base and the height. So we're going to count the dimensions of each of the parallelograms below, then count the number of squares inside each parallelogram. Alright, so this is a parallelogram, but it also is a rectangle. So the base, or the bottom, of this rectangle is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The height of this rectangle is 4. The number of squares is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 is 24 squares. So the area of this rectangle is 24 squares. Alright, so this is a parallelogram, okay? And we don't want this whole rectangle. We only want this part of it. Well, it's the same thing as a rectangle. So we're going to do the base and the height a little bit differently. A parallelogram just usually has this line going through it, but it still has the same base. So the base of this is still 6, and the height, this is not the height, because parallelograms, see over here how it has this diagonal? This is the diagonal, but we don't want the diagonal, we want the actual height, that amount. So the height, for this amount here, or here, it's all the same. The height is still 4. So if you notice, my dimensions are still the same. So there's still 24 squares that would fit inside of this. So let's look at this parallelogram right here. Okay, so if you notice, like on this one, we don't have the squares. But what are we doing here to get our answer? We don't need to count because we're really just multiplying, right? The base times the height. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 4 is 24. So on this one, the base is 9. The height, not this measurement, this is the height, is 7.3. So if you multiply those together in your calculator, 9, the base times the height, 9 times 7.3 means it would take 65.7 centimeters squared, because they're squares, right, to fill that shape. It says describe how the area of a rectangle and the area of a parallelogram with the same dimensions are related. So the area of a rectangle is length times width, right? That's what we did up here, length times width. The area of a parallelogram is base times height. That's supposed to be an H. But if you notice when we did base times height here, or length times width here, and base times height, we still get the same answer. So whether you're doing a rectangle or a parallelogram, you're still going to find the area the same way. They give you the same answer. So you can use length times width or base times height. Let's make that more like an L. Whichever one you want. Just know that when you're working with a parallelogram or a rectangle, either one, it's going to be length times width and base times height. Okay? Okay, so on your homework, what you're going to do is you need to identify the shape and then find the area. So is this a rectangle or a parallelogram? This is a rectangle, so let's write that in. And to find the area of a rectangle, we do length times width equals the area. So for this one, the length, that was right here, the length is 2 1/4 times the width is 1 1/2. So in your calculator, do 2 1/4 times 1 1/2. And when you multiply that, your answer would be 3 3/8. But don't just leave it like that. You have to include your measurement, which is feet. And because it's area, we're talking about all the squares, so you have to put your little squared sign. So 3 3/8 feet squared is your answer. If you miss the feet or the squared, your answer is wrong. So that's how you're going to do 1 through 5 on this page. Then you're going to flip it over. And on the back it says, give the number of square units in each figure. Find your answer and cross out the letters above it. When you finish, the answer to the title question will remain. So number 1, you can do a couple things. You can count the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is 12. Or you can say this is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 3. And because it's a rectangle, 4 times 3 is 12. Either way is fine. So you come to the bottom, you find 12, which is right here, and you scratch that out. All right, so go ahead and get started on your work. This should not take you that long. All right, since you watched all this, go ahead and put a star in the upper right corner of this paper. Put a star and then circle it. Okay, thanks. Have a good day. Bye.